Welcome to this week's edition of Ask an MS Expert. I'm John Strum, and I'm the host of the Real Talk MS podcast. Each week, Real Talk MS reaches thousands of people in more than 100 countries around the world with the news that people affected by MS need to know. My wife, Jean, lived with progressive MS for 23 years, so I've had a front row seat experiencing all the ways that MS can impact a family. I'm a past member of the International Progressive MS Alliance Scientific Steering Committee, and currently I'm a district activist leader and trustee for the National MS Society, and I chair the Society's California Government Relations Advisory Committee. The MS Society's Ask an MS Expert webcast is designed to give us a place for the MS community to connect and to connect you with MS experts who are ready to answer your questions on the topics that impact people affected by MS every day. Please feel free to post your comments and questions on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch. MS navigators are online throughout today's program, answering those questions and connecting you to resources. Getting a good night's sleep is essential to staying healthy and being able to focus on your daily activities. But about half the people living with multiple sclerosis experience sleep difficulties. Joining us today to discuss how sleep affects people with MS is Dr. Katie Siengsukon. Dr. Siengsukon is an associate professor at the University of Kansas Medical Center, where she's director of the Sleep Health and Wellness Lab. Dr. Siengsukon's research explores how sleep impacts function, learning, and overall health, particularly among the aging population and people who are living with neurological conditions. Welcome, Dr. Siengsukon, and thanks for joining us today.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
As I mentioned a moment ago, quality sleep is important to maintaining overall health and wellness, but sometimes it's hard to get a good night's sleep, and lack of restful sleep can cause daytime drowsiness and make some MS symptoms feel worse. How do you define quality sleep, and why is it particularly important for people who are living with MS?
That's a great question. And probably if you asked 5 people how they measure sleep quality or what they consider to be sleep quality, you'll get 5 different answers. But I'll tell you a few different ways that we measure that. And one of the most important ways is to ask the individual, what do you consider your sleep quality to be? Because that is so informative on how people describe their sleep and the words they use to describe their sleep quality. So that's one way to look at sleep quality. And then 2, we have some standard questionnaires that we use. So like the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index is a standard way to measure sleep quality. And it includes things like how much sleep are you getting? How would you rate your sleep quality yourself? How are different things impacting your sleep, like pain, or other symptoms. So that's another way that we measure or consider sleep quality. And then we have some other tools that we use too. So some people would measure sleep quality or consider sleep quality by how much sleep are you actually getting, considering how much time you're spending in bed. So we refer to that as sleep efficiency. But again, I would say the way that I measure sleep and how I would describe sleep quality is how would the person themselves consider their sleep quality? And why is it important for people with MS? So we definitely know that an individual's sleep quality is very associated with other health factors. So things like fatigue and depression and anxiety and pain, those oftentimes are very associated. So if you're not getting sufficient sleep quality, it can really impact some of those other MS symptoms that people oftentimes experience.
Well, while we're defining terms, let's talk about the term sleep disturbance. It's a general term that actually covers a wide range of sleep-related symptoms and disorders. Can you tell us what it normally includes?
So it's kind of what it sounds like. A sleep disturbance is anything that disturbs your sleep. So it could be, something with your body. If it's fatigue, if it's depression, if it's anxiety, if it's pain, if it's spasticity, of course, all those can disrupt your sleep. We would also consider sleep disorders to be potentially disrupting your sleep. So things like sleep apnea or restless leg syndrome, those are a couple common sleep disorders that we oftentimes see in people with MS. And then, of course, there can be also, environmental factors that can disturb your sleep, like noise, pets, children, bed partners, so all those different things can certainly disturb sleep. But you're right, it is very much an umbrella term of anything that can disturb your sleep.
Can you give us some examples of common sleep disturbances that affect people with MS? And do we know what may be causing them?
So, sleep disturbances are very common in people with MS. There's been estimates that up to 70% of people with MS experience sleep disturbances, and it's generally higher than what we would consider seeing in the general population. And some of it is contributed to the MS itself. If you have lesions in the brain that impact your sleep centers and your wake centers, that certainly can contribute to sleep disorders and thus sleep disturbances. Oftentimes we see, again, those common symptoms that we would see in people with MS disturb sleep. So pain, spasticity, fatigue, depression, anxiety, stress, those certainly can disturb sleep as well. So those are probably the common ones that we see most often in people with multiple sclerosis.
Well, I want to circle back to a few of those in just a couple of moments, but we heard from Hannah, who was diagnosed with MS 2 years ago, and she says she's not sleeping well. Besides feeling tired when she wakes up, Hannah wants to know if there are any long-term consequences from lack of sleep.
A good thing is that there's a lot more interest in studying sleep that we've seen in the past, 5-10 years, and also in people with MS. And so we do know that there can be long-term consequences if you're not getting sufficient sleep over a period of time. But I really want to stress, it's an increased risk. It doesn't mean that if you're not sleeping well, that you're going to get X, Y, or Z. But we definitely know that if you're not getting sufficient sleep, again, for a long period of time, you're at an increased risk of things like diabetes and obesity, depression, anxiety, increased pain, even cancer. There seems to be some association. So it's certainly something that if you are having sleep issues, talking with your physician about that to figure out for you what might be contributing, because of course there's lots of different factors that can be contributing, but the good news is that oftentimes something can be done to address that sleep issue. So certainly doesn't mean you're going to get one of these other health consequences, but it does put you at a higher risk of developing those other issues.
We've also heard from Micah, who says he notices that when he doesn't get a good night's sleep, he feels more physical pain. Micah wants to know whether there's any association between sleep and MS-related pain.
There is, and in pain, chronic pain conditions in general. So there's areas of the brain that modulate pain or influence pain. And so when you're not sleeping well, that ability of the brain to kind of manage that pain sensation gets lost, or it doesn't work as well as it should. So more pain is able to come through. We see people who have lower pain thresholds, so they experience pain with lower stimuli. They also have an increase in the pain experience that they have. So absolutely, not getting sufficient quality sleep can contribute to increase in pain.
Fatigue is one of the most common symptoms of MS, occurring in about 80% of the people diagnosed with MS. So let's talk about the relationship between sleep and fatigue. Does poor sleep contribute to MS fatigue?
It can, absolutely. Again, a very high association between sleep issues and fatigue. And I think sometimes the issue is really the difficulty in defining fatigue. Just as we have maybe difficulty defining sleep quality, or people define it different ways. Same thing with fatigue. We don't have a really great definition. Our people will use the word like, "Oh, I'm so sleepy," when they mean fatigue. But definitely there's a strong association between not getting sufficient sleep and fatigue. So sometimes, if you address the sleep issue, it also reduces that perception of fatigue as well. But I do want to stress that they are separate issues. So while they're associated, it's not necessarily guaranteed that just by sleeping better that your fatigue is going to get better or it's going to be completely mitigated. But certainly, some of the research that we've done by addressing sleep issues, we've also shown an improvement in fatigue as well.
Adam told us that he has sleep apnea and he experiences excessive sleepiness during the day. His doctor has recommended a device called a continuous positive airway pressure, or CPAP machine, to help Adam with his sleep apnea, which will hopefully reduce his fatigue. So Adam's wondering what this kind of a machine, the CPAP machine, will do for him, and could it really help with his fatigue?
It hopefully will, and there's evidence that it will. So a CPAP machine, that continuous positive pressure with sleep apnea, for people who have obstructive sleep apnea, is because they're having an anatomical constricture of their airway, either a complete closure of the airway where they have the apneas or the pauses of breathing, or they may have a reduction in the airway, so they have hypopnea, so they have a reduction in the amount of oxygen getting in and out of their lungs. And so that CPAP machine helps to keep the airway open. And so yes, you get more oxygen, but you also have less of those apnea hypopneas, and also then those micro arousals or those full arousals that people who have sleep apnea experience when that airway closes and they're kind of gasping for breath. So that reduces then that number of times that they waken up. And so it should increase then that sleep continuity, improve sleep efficiency, and thus have a positive impact on his fatigue as well.
Research has shown that there's an association between sleep disturbances and cognitive function. How does sleep impact cognitive function, and what does that mean for people who are living with MS?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's also an increased prevalence of cognitive issues in people with MS. And cognitive function, it's another umbrella term. And so, there's different domains of cognitive function that we usually measure separately. But we do know that sleep really can impact all of those different domains. So things like working memory, remembering lists of things like immediately, short-term memory, longer-term memory, things like executive function, where you're having to make decisions, being able to pay attention. All of those different domains can be impacted by not getting sufficient quality sleep. And so, again, by helping people sleep better, that may have a positive impact on cognitive function if that individual is having difficulties with their cognitive function in the first place.
Can sleep disturbances be predictive of future cognitive decline in MS?
So, we certainly know that sleep disturbances strongly can impact cognitive function. And if any of the listeners are having sleep issues, or people who have children know that, gosh, when I'm not sleeping well, I have a difficult time remembering things. I have a very difficult time, knowing what I need to do next. And when we start to sleep better, our cognitive function can improve. Now, I don't want to say that, again, I hesitate to say that if you have a sleep disturbance, it's going to predict your cognitive function down the road, because I don't want people to also think like, gosh, if I'm not sleeping well, I'm, destined to have, these major consequences. Now, we certainly know, in older adults, that if we help people sleep better, that does have, again, a positive impact on cognitive function. And so I would hope that by sleeping better, that definitely would improve cognitive function. But again, I'd be a little cautious in saying that it's necessarily going to predict long-term cognitive function.
With the additional stress of the COVID-19 pandemic, I'm sure plenty of people have had more than a few restless nights over the past couple of years. In fact, a recent international study found that sleep quality deteriorated during the pandemic for people who were living with MS. How does stress impact the quality of sleep?
Yeah, and we did a very small study just at KU Medical Center where we looked at sleep within clients who have MS at our medical center. And, we found a mixed bag. And, same thing with this international study. Of course, some people, especially if they have adequate resources, they could work from home. Again, they just have the resources. Maybe the pandemic didn't have as much of an impact on them as it did for other individuals that maybe don't have the same resources that other people do. And then we found some people that the pandemic didn't necessarily dramatically impact. So it really depends on the individual, of course, and their level of resource. But certainly the stress that can come with a pandemic, any stress, be it from a pandemic or other life events, can negatively impact your sleep. If you're worried, if you're, ruminating about that stressful event, oftentimes what we see is that, people are able to kind of stay busy during the day so that they can kind of keep their mind occupied and they don't worry about the stress, or they're not thinking about the stressful thing. But then when it comes to falling asleep, they're laying in bed and there's nothing really to distract them. And that's when they tend to worry and think about those negative things or those stressful events. And so certainly that stress can weigh heavy on people and can disrupt your sleep if you have a hard time kind of turning off your brain or managing that stress in a positive way.
I think you started answering my next question when we first started talking today, but I want to circle back to it. Can long-term lack of sleep cause mood disorders like depression and anxiety?
Again, I wouldn't say cause, but certainly associated, and certainly put you at a higher risk. And so, yes, there's lots of evidence that if you're not sleeping well, it definitely does put you at an increased risk of depression and anxiety. And the flip is also true. If you have depression and anxiety, it also puts you at an increased risk of developing sleep issues, particularly insomnia. And again, like what we see in the research is that if you're able to address the sleep issue, in particular insomnia, oftentimes that results in a positive impact on mood, depression, and anxiety as well, which again shows that they're heavily associated and interconnected.
So if someone finds that they're experiencing sleep difficulties, are there self-assessments that they can use to evaluate sleep, or do they need to see a healthcare professional?
I certainly think doing some self-evaluation is a great idea. And I encourage people, to bring that self-evaluation to their physician. So there's some, again, questionnaires that we would typically use that you can easily find on the internet that you can certainly take and see if you are above the threshold to be considered having poor sleep quality or excessive daytime sleepiness, or, there's questionnaires to look at risk for sleep apnea. So certainly, if you score above those thresholds, then talking to your physician makes a lot of sense. I oftentimes, what we do for our clients is we have people keep a sleep log, so that way we have them, track their sleep for a week or two, and then that's really informative both to us to kind of know how best to counsel them for their sleep issue, but it's also really informative oftentimes for the client as well, just to see their sleep, the trends over a week or two. Another thing is that, wearables are so common nowadays. I have so many people that come in and are like, oh, my wearable is telling me that I got this much sleep and this much deep sleep and whatnot. And I'm a little, I'm a little hesitant with some of the wearables because the data indicates that, some are more accurate than others. But again, I think those trends is generally what we look at. And so absolutely, like if you are suspecting a sleep issue and you do one of those kind of self-evaluations, please do talk with your physician, and bring that information to your physician or your healthcare provider. So that way they have that information, from the get-go, and that hopefully will even kind of hasten you getting the treatment or the assistance or the next steps that's most appropriate for you.
Can you explain what good sleep hygiene is, and maybe share some healthy sleep habits that people can create on their own?
Absolutely. And I tend to shy away from the term sleep hygiene just because for some people they're like hygiene. I mean, like I shower and so I tend to use sleep health promotion techniques. But sleep hygiene is certainly a very common term and something that you'll hear and you'll read about quite a bit. So kind of the four main categories that I focus on is strategies to entrain circadian rhythm. So things like having a regular wake up time, exposure to light during the day, making sure your bedroom environment is dark at night. So that way your brain knows if it's dark, I should be sleeping. If I'm being exposed to light and the sun, I should be awake. We also encourage people to increase their sleep drive. So, being physically and cognitively active fills up what we refer to as your sleep drive balloon, which you want to be really, really full. And so doing things too, like, limiting naps if possible to make sure your sleep drive is really high. Again, being physically active as best you can, that helps to increase your sleep drive. And then the third category is we focus on reducing sleep arousal. So focusing on relaxation techniques. So that way, when it is time to fall asleep, your body is able to fall asleep. And again, your body's not feeling as stressed. You're not ruminating about maybe some of those stressful things. So we also focus on that. And then the fourth category is kind of, the other category. So things like, avoiding too much caffeine, avoiding nicotine and alcohol before bedtime, making sure your bedroom or the room that you sleep in is quiet. So those are all, again, various strategies that can be very helpful to enhance your sleep.
Well, you mentioned insomnia just a couple of moments ago, and we've heard from Karen, who has experienced insomnia since a pandemic started. Now she's noticed it's gotten worse, and Karen has a few questions. First, she'd like to know how she can stop worrying about things that are out of her control, like the pandemic.
Yeah, if I had a magic answer for that, that would be fantastic. People manage stress in very different ways. And certainly the strategies that we have found very helpful and literature suggests to be helpful, are doing relaxation techniques. And there's a lot of different relaxation techniques. It's not that one is better than the other. The trick is really to find one that works for you and to be consistent. So we tend to focus on like deep breathing. So 4-7-8 breathing, where you breathe in for 4, hold it for 7, exhale for 8. We also focus on progressive muscle relaxation. We also focus on mindfulness. So those are the ones that we tend to use. But again, there's certainly other relaxation techniques. So that again is really key. So that way, when you do then get into bed, you're able to fall asleep quickly and easily. I oftentimes will recommend journaling for a lot of my clients that I work with who have insomnia, just to help them. And journaling takes many different forms. So for some people, it might be that they need to process what happened during the day, that maybe they need to have a to-do list, maybe they need to write down what they're going to do tomorrow. So journaling can be very helpful. But certainly, if those kind of behavioral strategies are not helpful and you're still having this increased stress or this increased worry, then certainly seeing a psychologist or another healthcare provider that can help you manage that stress in a positive way, I would certainly recommend, because absolutely stress can have a big impact on our sleep and make our insomnia worse.
Well, Karen's next question sounds pretty tricky. She says that she worries almost every night about whether she's going to get a good night's sleep. She thinks her worrying about falling asleep is actually what's keeping her awake. How
Yes.
did she stop this cycle?
Yeah, and that's super common, is that people get into this cycle of I'm not sleeping well, I'm never going to sleep well, and really then the bed can even become like a trigger of worry. And so part of what we do in our intervention, which we call cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, is we try to retrain the brain to associate the bed with sleep and not with this worry and anxiety. And again, it's not necessarily easy to do, but with repetition and with getting out of bed when you are experiencing that worry, again, for some people with multiple sclerosis, we have to modify that because we don't want people getting in and out of bed. So it kind of depends partially on their ability. But yeah, working on the relaxation strategies can be very helpful. And then certainly, some people do need, short-term medication to help them kind of get over that hump, have their brain and their body realize, wow, I can actually sleep, to kind of get over that hump of that worry. But generally, we usually try the behavioral strategies first, and if those aren't helpful, then again, sometimes short-term medication can be helpful. But the key is to have that be short-term and usually in combination with the behavioral strategies as well.
Well, I know you've conducted research looking at cognitive behavioral therapy to treat insomnia. Can you tell us quickly what cognitive behavioral therapy is and what your research revealed?
Absolutely. So cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, or CBTI for short. It's for our program, it's a one time a week for 6 weeks. For some other programs, it's 8 weeks or it's every other week. There's a little bit of variability in how you do it. But we really focus on, implementing, again, these behavioral strategies of trying to implement a regular wake up time, of implementing what we call stimulus control, where if you're not sleeping, and you're in bed, then you get out of bed, or we have them do other relaxation strategies in bed if they're not able to get out of bed, to again associate the brain, to associate the bed with sleep. We focus a lot on relaxation strategies and finding one that works for the client. We have people keep a sleep log for the entire duration of the intervention. So that way we can see, how their sleep is changing and how their sleep is improving. And then we can modify those strategies based on how their sleep is or is not changing. But the really great news is with CBTI is that it's been shown to be very effective. And it's actually the recommended intervention for people with insomnia. And so, yes, we've done a few different trials in people with multiple sclerosis. We've done an in-person trial. We've actually done a web-based version. We've done a telehealth version. Because of the pandemic, we had to really quickly shift to doing everything virtually, and we thought, well, let's do CBTI via Zoom. But regardless of the delivery, the good news is that for the people that we worked with, their insomnia got better. And so not only did their sleep improve, but we also saw an improvement in their depression and their anxiety and their fatigue. So those very common symptoms that we oftentimes see in people with MS. And so we're hoping to get funding to do a larger trial to see which delivery method is most effective in people with MS. So stay tuned on that.
We will. And I want to thank you for sharing some great information and insights on what's really an important topic. Let me ask you, what would you say are the top 3 takeaways that you'd like our viewers to remember?
Let's see, top 3 takeaways. I mean, I think the one of the big ones is if you are having a sleep issue, to talk to your physician. So many of the clients that I work with who have MS, no one has talked to them about their sleep. And that's super unfortunate. But in some ways, obviously, depending on the healthcare provider, they maybe are focused on different things, or maybe the person with MS, they have other symptoms that are a higher priority to them. But I think that's my big one, is to make sure that if you do have a sleep issue, there likely is something that can be done with it. So that, I think, is the big one. And then 2, making sure that understanding that by addressing your sleep issue, it could have a positive impact on these other symptoms that you may or may not be having. So I think those would be my big takeaways for people with MS.
Well, I want to thank everyone who submitted questions, and thank you for being with us today, Dr. Siengsukon.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Before we close, I want to remind you that the National MS Society's MS Navigator team is your best partner when it comes to connecting you to the very best information and resources on living with MS. You can reach an MS Navigator by phone, email, or through the Society's website by chat. For information and resources on MS, please visit the Society's website. You'll find research updates and news, information on connection programs like self-help groups and MS Friends. You'll find ways to get involved, and you'll hear about upcoming events that are taking place near you. Remember, you can connect with the National MS Society and others affected by MS on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And I hope you'll join me every week on the Real Talk MS podcast, where I continue the conversation that we start here. You'll find Real Talk MS at realtalkms.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. I'd like to thank Dr. Siengsukon for joining us today. Please remember that a recording of this webinar is going to be available at the Society's website at nationalmssociety.org/MSExpert, as well as on Facebook and YouTube. I hope you'll join us at this same time for next week's edition of Ask an MS Expert. You can always find our upcoming program topics on the National MS Society's website. And now I have a favor to ask each of you. Getting your feedback on today's program is important. So if you're watching on Facebook Live, you'll see a link to a survey pinned to the comments section. And on YouTube, you'll find that link in the program description. Completing the survey makes a real difference. The information you provide helps us continuously improve, and it helps shape future programs. The survey takes just 1 minute, so I hope you'll take a minute to fill it out. On behalf of Dr. Katie Siengsukon and the National MS Society, I want to thank you once again for joining us. Please stay safe and make healthy choices.